And it is in progress now. You will be able to find the recording of this presentation on the ACEDS.org website, ACEDS.org, if you are a member of ACEDS. If you would like more information on it, please email us at orangecounty@aceds.org. But let's go ahead and get the introduction done. Good evening, everyone. I hope you've all grabbed your different beverage, whatever your choice is after hour, because it's 5 o'clock somewhere. And we want to thank you for joining us for the first session of the 2021 Summer Refresher Conference, otherwise known as 2.0, that I've been calling it. My name is Marla Mohr, and I am the president of the Orange County chapter of ACEDS. Our conference is hosted by the San Diego Paralegal Association and the ACEDS of Orange County chapter. If you have not done so already and you are a paralegal in San Diego, please check out this SDPA at sdparalegals.org. If you have any questions for the SDPA, please email them at membership@sdparalegals.org. Right now, ACES does not have a chapter in San Diego, but the Orange County chapter does welcome everybody from San Diego and the Inland Empire. If you want more information on ACEDS, we're at aceds.org, or once again, you can email us at orangecounty@aceds.org. Both of these organizations are wonderful organizations. They both promote education, professional development, and networking. Now, this evening, I am absolutely thrilled to kick off our conference with none other than Mr. Doug Austin. Doug is an established e-discovery thought leader with over 30 years of experience providing e-discovery best practices, legal technology, consulting, and technical project management services to numerous commercial and government clients. He has published a daily blog since 2010 and has written numerous articles and white papers. He received the J.D. Supra Reader's Choice Award as the top e-discovery author for 2017 and 2018, and the J.D. Supra Reader's Choice Award as the top cybersecurity author for 2019. And for those of you that do not follow his twice daily blog from eDiscovery Today, I highly recommend that you go over there, sign up for it immediately. The content is great. It's everything from eDiscovery to cybersecurity, talking about our conference. Thank you again for that, Doug. And just to let you know too, Doug has presented at numerous events and conferences, including Legal Tech New York, ILTACon, Relativity Fest, University of Florida eDiscovery Conference, the Masters Conference, and also at many local and regional conferences. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to introduce Doug Austin.
Well, thanks, Marla. Thanks for the nice introduction. I'm excited to lead off the Summer Refresher 2.0, as you put it. And I want to thank the San Diego Paralegals Association and the ACEDS Orange County chapter for inviting me. So, hey, without further ado, let's get into it. So here's the agenda. As you can see, it's kind of broken into challenges and potential solutions. And I have to be honest here. I'll be discussing a number of challenges that you all are facing these days, even if your company never has significant litigation to manage. There's going to be some sobering statistics and information that might make you be feeling a little depressed at a certain point, but stick with me. I'm going to discuss some of the ways you can address these challenges, and I'll talk about where the technology seems to be heading to hopefully offer some relief today and hopefully tomorrow. And of course, as both June and Marla mentioned, I'll look to save a few minutes at the end for questions. So feel free to pose those on the chat and I will do my best to answer them. Of course, you know, I don't have to remind you that I have to start by saying that any ideas expressed by us here or by me are my own, not those of my partners or clients. You work in legal, so you know the drill. And as we mentioned, I don't have to remind you that it's 5 o'clock somewhere. For many of you on the West Coast, it's 5 o'clock right now. So feel free to open up a cold one. Don't worry, this session's being recorded. It might make the sobering statistics less sobering, and it might even make my jokes funny. I don't know about that, but we'll see. So shameless plug warning, as Marla mentioned, I am the editor of eDiscovery Today, which is a daily blog about EDiscovery, cybersecurity and data privacy trends, best practices, and case law at ediscoverytoday.com. We've got a partnership with EDRM where we conduct monthly case law webinars. I encourage you to check out, with terrific thought leadership commentary from Mary Mack, Tom O'Connor, and of course, Judge Peck. And if you follow the blog by email, you'll get links to 2 great industry reports you see there below, and any that I publish going forward. So consider following the blog by email. And that's the end of the shameless plug. So with that said, let's get started with the e-discovery challenges that organizations face today. The first one is the enormous growth in the volume of data that's discoverable today. And yet we're talking about big data. As you can see, Discovery Today pulled out all the stops in our animation budget for this presentation. You probably all heard the term big data. It was voted the second most overused technology term a few years ago. What was the first? Can you guess? We'll get to that later in the presentation. Regardless, the amount of data in the world is larger than ever, exponentially so, and it's causing significant discovery challenges for organizations all over. So, whoops, I went a little fast there, my bad. So how extensive is the extent of big data? Here's some fun facts for you to consider. Every day, every 2 days, we create as much information as we did from the beginning of time until 2003. Data is growing to the point that by last year, about 1.7 megabytes of new information is being created every second for every human being on the planet. By 2025, our accumulated digital universe of data will grow from 1/10 of a zettabyte in 2005, when the EDRM model was created, to about 163 zettabytes, which is 163 trillion gigabytes. And my favorite one, if you burned all the data created in just 1 day onto DVDs, you could stack them on top of each other and reach the moon twice. And here's the even scarier part. These stats are several years old, before the continued advancement of mobile devices and before Internet of Things or IoT devices were really a big part of our lives. So here's another way to look at that growth of data over the last several years, as well as future projected growth. As you can see in this chart, last year, there was 470 times more data in the world than there was just back in 2005. And it will nearly quadruple again by 2025. You think the creators of the EDRM model realized that the amount of data that the model would have to support would grow over 1,630 times in size in 20 years. Without a doubt, that level of data growth has certainly caused considerable evolution in e-discovery workflows over the years. And if it were just the volume of data, that would be one thing, but it's a lot of other V words that reflect today's big data challenge. Words like variety, variability, vulnerability, and value, which leads to one C word, which is complexity. Here's the Internet minute chart for 2021. As you can see, a lot happens every minute on the Internet. Things like over 197 million emails per minute, over 21 million text messages per minute just on iMessage, even 2 million Tinder swipes per minute, and so forth. This is all data that's got to be tracked and accounted for more and more by organizations today. The preservation burden for organizations is not just getting larger, it's also getting wider. And I mentioned IoT devices a couple of slides ago. They're all over the place today, and they're becoming more and more relevant to litigation, especially in criminal cases. Everything from smart bulbs to smart thermostats, to Fitbits and Apple Watches, to Ring doorbells and Amazon Echoes. Even pacemakers, car infotainment systems, and shoes where you can press a button to order a pizza. We've seen Fitbits identify or exonerate suspects, including a murder case I covered a couple of years ago, where the victim's Fitbit recorded a rapid rise in her heart rate just before a sudden drop off to nothing, which coincided with her stepfather's visit to her house caught by surveillance camera. I also just covered a civil case involving Fitbit data related to a plaintiff's claim that a hip implant gone wrong had significantly impacted his ability to walk long distances. I've also seen a case where a person was arrested for arson of his own house, in part because his pacemaker showed considerable activity at a time before the fire when he said he was sleeping. Instead, he was getting a lot of his items, most important items, moved out of the house before setting the fire. So certainly these devices will only continue to add to potential challenges for organizations over time. So now let's talk about risk. Another challenge for organizations today is increasing data privacy regulations. GDPR went into effect in 2018 to protect data privacy rights for citizens of the European Economic Area, which is even larger than the EU. It's stronger than the 1995 European Union directive in that it demands, not requests, data privacy compliance. And fines for failing to comply can be huge. As you see here, up to 4% of annual revenue or 20 million euro, whichever is greater. And we are seeing some significant fines, with these fines for Google and Amazon just a few months ago. That Google fine may seem like a lot, but their annual revenue in 2019 was $162 billion. So 4% of that would have been nearly $6.5 billion. So it could have certainly been a lot worse. Under GDPR, European citizens are known as data subjects. And as you can see here, there are a lot of types of personal information that falls under GDPR that organizations have to be prepared for. It's not just things like name, ID numbers, home address, and email address. It's also data related to genetic, biometric health, and sexual orientation of the data subjects. And this all greatly increases the compliance burden for organizations. But you may be thinking, well, that's Europe. That doesn't really apply to my business. But chances are you're wrong. Here are some examples of types of US companies that are subject to GDPR. And it's not just big companies either, as evidenced by that last bullet point. Any company that has European clients and tracks data for those clients is subject to GDPR. And if GDPR doesn't get you, your own California Consumer Privacy Act that went into effect last year could. Like GDPR, it protects the rights of Californians, and it applies to your organization if you have California customers, whether or not you're located there. If you're most businesses of any size, you probably have either European or Californian customers with personal data that needs to be protected. And as you can see by the last sentence there, it didn't take long for us to start seeing litigation around CCPA associated with personal data. So most states don't even have one privacy law yet. California has already passed a second law. The CCPA wasn't even out of diapers yet when California voters passed the CPRA last November. And the CPRA significantly expands the data privacy rights of consumers over what the CCPA covers, and it will replace it at the beginning of 2023. Virginia has also recently passed its own data privacy law, CDPA, or some people refer to it as the CDPA, and other states or countries are currently looking at tightening data privacy restrictions as well. There's even growing demand for a national data privacy law in the US. So certainly without a doubt, compliance requirements for organizations regarding data privacy are continually changing, which has become another significant challenge as well. And here are some of the common categories of personal data to protect. You'll hear terms like PII, PHI, and PCI thrown about. So here's what they mean. There's really a veritable alphabet soup of acronyms out there that relate to data and protection of that data. PII is a superset of all personal information, and it's become imperative for organizations to understand where they store PII data so they can properly address any risk associated with that data. None of this has anything to do with litigation, by the way. It's all a compliance issue. So your organization's discovery burden is probably rising, even if you never have any meaningful litigation. And here's an example of data privacy adding to discovery burdens. Data subject access requests, or DSARs. This is an entirely new EDiscovery workflow that didn't even exist a few years ago. And it's one that any organization that stores personal data for data subjects will need to be prepared to address, regardless whether you have any litigation or not. DSARs can be merely requests to identify the data you store about customers in general, or the data you store about the requesting customer, or it can be a request to delete or move that data for the requesting customer. Obviously, you have to know where and how to find that data to respond, so an organization's governance program for their data becomes much more important to address what are really ever-changing data privacy requirements today and in the future. So investigations are also becoming a much bigger challenge for organizations, and two factors are at the rise of that are part of the rise of that are harassment claims in the era of Me Too, and increased concerns about fraud and corporate malfeasance. As you can see from Kroll and Mohring's litigation forecast from a couple of years ago, Me Too was expected to be one of this year's top litigation trends. And as the partner noted in her quote, we were really just beginning to see litigation arising from Me Too back then. As we've all seen several times recently, harassment claims can derail a company, such as a once prominent film studio that we've all heard of, or even, as we saw just as recently as yesterday, potentially derail a political career. And today organizations don't just have to worry about individuals filing harassment claims. States have been recently passing a ton of legislation to establish requirements with which organizations need to comply as well. And violations could and probably will lead to states filing claims against lawyers on behalf of harassment victims. These are new litigation possibilities that organizations need to be prepared for. So how do you spot potential harassment or discrimination within your own organization? Here are some things to look for that can be signs of harassment or discrimination. They're the type of things that your internal investigations team has to now be on the lookout, bless you, for more. They have to be on the lookout for more than they ever have been before. And imagine if you had this type of information at your fingertips to catch a problem early and address it appropriately before that problem leads to litigation. It could literally save your company. As you can see here, corporate fraud and malfeasance is also an issue in many organizations today as well. And that increases the burden on companies to perform investigations on their own employees. There are so many types of fraudulent activities, potential fraudulent activities by employees today to watch out for. And as we will see in a couple of slides, the cost to organizations can be huge. And sure, there are a variety of ways that fraud is detected in organizations, but often the fraud is initially detected not due to investigative techniques, but almost just plain dumb luck. Nearly half of all fraud is initially identified through a tip or by accident, means that are that are other than investigative techniques. We saw this a couple of years ago in the college admission scandal, where Southern Cal, among other universities, was involved. And that investigation started because a Yale dad who was being investigated in a securities fraud case offered up a tip to get leniency in his case, which in turn broke the college scandal wide open. So that was a tip that led to that investigation. And here's the potential cost, which the potential cost to organizations, both internal and external, can be huge. The stakes are high for organizations, and again, finding the fraud early can save huge costs. It can literally save your company. Imagine if you were able to find out that employees about to depart your company were stealing your trade secrets, and you could address the issue promptly before they ever join a competitor or start their own competing company. So the timing of your investigation and the ability to conduct discovery quickly to support it is really more important than ever. And of course, we also have the huge jump in remote work and collaboration, especially since the COVID-19 pandemic began. And that's another huge challenge in terms of where ESI is coming from to support discovery, as well as how EDiscovery is actually performed. As you see here by these two graphs, we saw huge jumps in the use of cloud-based collaboration platforms like Teams and Zoom within just a few months once the pandemic hit. And organizations of all sizes are moving their use of Office Suite solutions to the cloud as well, with M365 and Google's G Suite. And this has created new e-discovery challenges, as many organizations have adopted a policy to link to files that they used to attach to within emails. That's created a significant disruption to the handling of emails and attachments as family groups that we're all used to for discovery purposes. So if you, if you think of conversations today, it means that business conversations have become, in many cases, bifurcated, trifurcated, or even quadfurcated. And yes, that's a real word. I looked it up. And here's an example of a potential real business scenario involving a company about to release a new product. An R&D team member reaches out to his boss via email, expressing safety concerns about the product and links to a report in SharePoint with more information. When the boss doesn't respond to the email or a follow-up email, that never happens to any of you, right? He texts her to follow up, which finally gets a response from her via text, directing the employee to start a conversation thread in Slack regarding the document. In the meantime, the VP schedules a Zoom meeting with the team to further the discussion, and because a couple of team members are out on vacation, records the meeting. Does that sound like a pretty typical scenario in today's world? It certainly does to me. And, what happens when the product is released, people are injured and lawsuits are filed, and you have to collect ESI related to discussions about product safety. You're looking at as many as 5 different sources from which the ESI has to be collected to piece back together the discussions that have taken place. So remote work and collaboration through a variety of messaging and communications platforms has just made discovery more complex for all of us. So job security, right? And how it's impacted discovery services are performed as well. According to Rob Robinson's complex discovery site, the original market estimates for collection and review were literally flipped upside down when the pandemic hit last year. Instead of 5 to 10% of 2020 collection and review work estimated to be done remotely at the start of the pandemic, those numbers shot up to 90% expected remote work for both types of services. Some companies already had workflows in place to support remote collection and review, but many others had to scramble to quickly support that rapidly changing dynamic. And for many companies, performing these services remotely has become the new normal, and they'll keep performing them remotely even after the pandemic ends, if it ever does, that is, and hopefully it will sooner rather than later. And these 2 graphs just from complex discovery just illustrate just how stark and sudden the move to remote work was when the pandemic hit. And I'm sure I don't have to tell many of you how stark and sudden it was. Many of you probably lived it. So now, let's take a look at data breaches. Nothing new happening there, right? Of course, that's not right. We're seeing a lot happening there. Just 2 weeks ago, I covered a study regarding the handling of passwords within organizations, and the numbers are shocking. 1 out of 4 people surveyed still had access to accounts at former jobs. Over 40% of respondents said they shared passwords within the workplace, and more than 20% said they use the same passwords for both business and personal accounts. So that's just really an example of one reason why we're seeing so many more data breaches than we've ever seen before. Passwords are the easiest way in. And that's leading to things like stats like the last stat on the page, more than 5 times as many individuals being impacted by data breaches from a single quarter to the following quarter. And there's more, much more. Not millions, not even billions, but trillions of dollars of damages expected from global cybercrime in 2021. Over 15 million new malware apps found in a single month at the beginning of this year. And global ransomware reports growing 7 times as much within a 6-month period 1 year later. Not only do these data breaches lead to litigation for which discovery has to be conducted, but failing to take care of data in your discovery processes could lead to data breaches, which then leads to more discovery about these processes. So it can be a vicious cycle if you're not careful. And it's certainly something that is on the mind of every e-discovery professional these days. So let's summarize the challenges here. Data is growing in organizations like crazy. There are more sources than ever where data resides, and far more devices than ever. Data privacy laws are greatly increasing the compliance burdens within organizations. Investigative burdens are growing as well, thanks to Me Too and increased employee fraud. Remote work is making discovery more challenging, both in terms of sources via site to discover, and also in terms of where discovery work is being conducted. And cybercrime and data breaches are continuing to escalate dramatically. And I didn't even mention emoji and the challenges of discovering emoji, which is prevalent in just about any form of communication today. By the way, little known fact, the plural of emoji is still emoji. So I bet at least some of you may not have known that. So I have to apologize at this point if you all think I'm a bit of a Debbie Downer, womp womp. But cheer up, I'm about to talk about how technology can help address at least some of these challenges, hopefully most of them today and tomorrow. So we'll get into that. And really, when it comes to how technology can help address these challenges, we're seeing technology in discovery address challenges in three primary areas. The first is workflow automation, which is a never-ending challenge in e-discovery. Workflows are always changing. Therefore, those changes are always needing to be automated to be as efficient as possible. So we'll talk about how they have been automated over the past several years, as well as the trends for continued automation going forward. The second trend is the move to the left of the EDRM model. Because of many of the challenges that I mentioned earlier, including data privacy compliance requirements and the rise of internal investigations within organizations, those organizations are having to look more at information governance and how technology can help them govern their information more effectively to meet these challenges. And the final trend is the application of AI-related technologies to legal tech and e-discovery workflows, which we've also been seeing for several years, though the potential use cases for the technology have increased significantly. By the way, remember the most overused technical terms that I mentioned before? Artificial intelligence was the most overused technical term in that list from a couple of years ago. Did you guess it? If so, good job. E-discovery workflows used to be highly manual, and they required data processing operators to move data through each step of the discovery process. So historically, you collected data, then you copied it in a place where your e-discovery processing software could proceed to process it. Then once it was processed, you loaded it into your e-discovery review platform to support document review. Once potentially responsive documents were identified for production, you might have then loaded those back into the processing platform, which also served as production platform. And that process was highly manual just a decade or so ago. But in the early 2010s, the emergence of cloud-based on-demand e-discovery platforms came to the forefront to automate the flow of data among the steps. Should note that I could have called them on-demand discovery platforms, but the acronym for that would have been odd. Another common term for them is do-it-yourself or self-service e-discovery platforms. I'm sure you've heard those terms thrown about as well. With these platforms, you could then point to files on a desktop or a network share, copy those to the platform, which would then automatically process and load those into the review module, where you could conduct your review and then proceed to perform document production. So this automated workflow eliminated several manual steps, enabling discovery teams to get more done with less. And there are numerous on-demand e-discovery platforms out there today. You might be surprised how many. It's close to 50. So now we're starting to see workflow automation extend even further left within the EDRM model to include identification through production. You'll hear terms thrown about like end-to-end and best of breed, and these are terms that sound great from a marketing perspective, but they can mean different things to different people. So it's important to get specifics as to how a particular software provider defines those terms and what technology is used to accomplish end-to-end or best-of-breed discovery. Sometimes their process may not be as automated as they would like you to make you believe. True end-to-end discovery ultimately involves all the phases of the EDRM model, and that's what many providers are now striving for within their technology stacks, which typically today involve a combination of platforms to accomplish that goal. There's really no single platform that really goes from InfoGov all the way through presentation. It's a combined effect. So the key is how well they support the requirements of each phase and how automated the flow of data is between each of the platforms in their solution. So from your perspective, if you're considering technology, it's important to do your homework, ask a lot of questions, and arrange the ability to try it before you buy it. Additional areas that to automate workflows now include things like high-speed processing of data to literally crunch through terabytes of information within hours, not days, in part by eliminating the need to copy the entire data corpus for processing. Now it copies mostly the metadata and uses that. Early data assessment to understand what you have sooner in the case to make effective decisions to support the case, and also to minimize the amount of data that has to be transmitted downstream. You'll hear the term early case assessment used to define that same process, but ECA is technically a different process of assessing the value of your case and whether you should litigate or settle, among other things. Finally, predictive coding, or TAR, help automate the review process, which is still the most expensive phase of discovery by far. And we'll get to that one shortly. So certainly one trend we're seeing is with so much information to manage about the discovery process itself, analytics have become vital to process improvement for the discovery process. So business intelligence or BI solutions are becoming more important to understand the details associated with your discovery process and where the bottlenecks occur. So you can address those bottlenecks and streamline your discovery processes. Business intelligence solutions are really becoming a must-have for discovery teams that are looking to maximize the efficiency of their discovery processes. So in talking about leveraging technology to move to the left of the EDRM model, that certainly starts with information governance. And this is the information governance reference model, or IGRM, from EDRM. It's actually the brand new public comment version. Doesn't it look great? They really kind of done a good job here. And with all the challenges today that I discussed earlier, it's imperative that organizations have strong IG policies and procedures. They need things like corporate data maps and effective bring your own device or BYOD policies and so forth. And executed properly, those are a great way to help understand where your data resides. And they help promote disposal of redundant, obsolete, or trivial data, which put together is known as ROT. And unfortunately, a recent RAND study found that 44% of companies didn't have any formal data governance policy, and 22% of companies without a data policy didn't even have any plans to implement one. So it only helps if you embrace an IG policy. But will information governance bail us out of this mess? Here's where IG policies, while important and necessary, don't address the entire issue. IG policies are good for identifying which barn your haystack is located in, but not so good in finding the needle within that haystack necessarily. For that, technology is becoming more and more necessary to help you pinpoint that key data quickly through products that are designed to ingest and index large amounts of data quickly to address increased compliance and investigative needs. And so, as I discussed earlier, one trend historically associated with the e-discovery lifecycle is that the data moves to the technology. Yep, that's our animation budget at work again. Files are preserved and collected. They're moved into a processing application for culling and processing, and they're moved to a review application for review and production. Sometimes they're even moved into a different application to handle specific production requirements. And then even a smaller subset may move on to presentation software applications for presentation at trials and depots. But at the outset, when you're starting to assess what you have, because of big data, the amount of data that you may need to cull through may be enormous. And today, it may be terabytes and terabytes of information from more sources than ever. So when you're needing to cull data down or merely look for needles within the haystacks, more and more, the technology has to be able to move to where the data is. Platforms today need to be able to index where the data where it is and where it lies, because in most cases, it's simply not efficient to move or copy the data to be indexed for searching. So index and place technology is helping organizations address the IG challenge to index terabytes of data and enable them to perform some of the same culling processes to identify potentially responsive ESI upstream. So when you talk to EDiscovery providers today, many of them will be talking about how they're moving discovery upstream and how they're moving left of the EDR model. And it's important to understand what they mean by that and how they're accomplishing that goal through leveraging technology. And it's important to understand here that there's a little bit of a different way of looking at discovery by breaking it into two components: data discovery and legal discovery. Data discovery is pre-litigation, pre-investigation, pre-audit. That's the day-to-day process of exploring data patterns within your organization to gain insight and find issues to be addressed, hopefully in many cases proactive. And this is where more and more of the discovery is starting to happen to address growing compliance and investigation needs that organizations have day in and day out. Legal discovery, or what we've historically called e-discovery, is initiated by a trigger event. A case is filed, an investigation is started, an audit is scheduled, and that leads to the process of all of the EDRM activities, identification through production and presentation, typically associated with the e-discovery process. Data discovery is about insight, legal discovery is about process. So, to summarize, the benefits of index and place technologies are the ability to perform EDA further upstream, where the source data lives. And instead of migrating an entire custodian's data corpus, which is likely to have lots of non-responsive data in it, you only migrate what's potentially responsive. So that saves considerable time and cost for all the downstream processes, from collection to processing, review, and production. One big challenge, however, is applying that technology to a variety of data sources across the organization. Take M365, for example. It may index much of a corporation's email and office files, but not necessarily all that content in all circumstances. And it won't do anything about mobile device data, social media data, collaboration app data for apps other than Microsoft apps, and so forth. So you need a plan for each source of data and how each will be handled. One final reason why e-discovery companies are moving to the left. The e-discovery market as we know it today is growing at about a 10% compound annual growth rate, CAGR, and the software services market is expected to be over $17 billion by 2023. But the enterprise governance, risk, and compliance market is expected to be almost $44 billion by next year. So that's over 2.5 times the market size 1 year earlier. And that's just an indication of how big the market's become. And we all know that when you want to know where technology is heading, the best way to do that is to follow the money. Speaking of following the money, let's talk about AI. And I'm not talking about the Steven Spielberg movie of 2001 with Hugh Haley Joel Osment playing the prototype AI robot that wishes he could become a real boy so that his mother would take him back. Whatever happened to him, by the way. I'm talking about algorithms that we use in our daily lives and even in our e-discovery workflows today. Of course, one form of AI-like technology is machine learning, and we use it today in our TV and movie viewing, music listening, shopping, and so forth. So if I watch a documentary about one classic rock performer, Netflix suggests others I might like as well. Or if my wife watches the movie Revolutionary Road with Leo DiCaprio and Kate Winslet, it was my wife, I swear. Netflix suggests other movies, either with those same actors or similar themes. Now, if I give shows or movies a bad rating, it's less likely to suggest similar shows or movies. And of course, another example is Pandora, and that's true with my music listening in Pandora as well. The Jimi Hendrix radio station that I listen to will suggest other classic rock songs, such as "I'd Love to Change the World" by 10 Years After. And if and then I can either give them a thumbs up or thumbs down to train the algorithm which songs I like. For the record, I would never give a song a thumbs down. So while some purists may not like these examples to explain AI and machine learning as it's applied to e-discovery, they still do provide a real world example that I think we can all relate to. Which leads to the first dilemma about AI, defining what it is and the terms we use for applying it to e-discovery. Here are various terms that we currently use in e-discovery to refer to AI-related technologies, and the most popular use of it in e-discovery today, predictive coding. Even the term predictive coding isn't used by everyone. Some refer to it synonymously with technology-assisted review, or TAR, while others consider predictive coding to be a subset of TAR, along with clustering and even keyword searching. Other people refer to predictive coding as machine learning, or even supervised machine learning, or where people train the algorithm, what's important and what's not. Others still refer to it by the type of predictive coding being conducted, such as TAR 1.0 or TAR 2.0. And people use the term continuous active learning, or CAL, synonymously with TAR 2.0. So when you're discussing AI or TAR, it's important to make sure you're on the same page with others as to what it means. Remember, we're in an industry that can't even agree on how to spell e-discovery. So misunderstandings happen regularly. And by the way, the Sedona conference defines these terms and many others in the glossary, which is linked at the bottom of the slide. Even AI may not be AI, it may be IA. You may hear the term augmented intelligence to refer to machine learning developed to enhance human intelligence rather than operate independently of or outright replace it, which many consider to be true AI. So it's important to understand the various terms that might be used to refer to the technology and how they differ. Purists and data scientists do, and they certainly will tend to argue if you don't use the terms the right place at the right time. So what can AI-related technologies be used for in legal today? A lot. I'm assuming most of you are familiar with the predictive coding use case, but there are many others, including contract analysis and management, identification of sensitive data such as PII, which is vital to support data privacy compliance objectives, classifying documents pre-litigation, such as documents that should always be classified as privileged, regardless of the case, normalization of names, so that the system realizes that Doug Austin, Dozier Austin, yes, my first name is Dozier, and DD Austin are the same person. Or things like linguistic analysis, which can be useful in identifying potential harassment. Those are just some examples of AI-related technology that's in use and helping discovery teams today. We're not talking about future use. These are use cases that are in place today. So of course, when you look at predictive coding specifically, legal people always ask, is it accepted by the courts? And the answer is yes, resoundingly, for over 9 years now, since Judge Peck's ruling in the De Silva Mohr case. These are just a few examples of cases I've covered over the years where predictive coding use has been approved. There are many others that I've covered, and way many more cases where approval is not even an issue anymore. They just conduct predictive coding with no big deal. So today the scrutiny tends to be more how it's conducted, not whether it should be. So with years of court approval and lots of use cases, is predictive coding used widely in discovery today? Well, not as much as you might think. Here's a graph from the 2021 State of the Industry report by eDiscovery Today, where 31.1% of 183 respondents said they use predictive coding technologies and approaches in all or most of their cases. But 32.8% of respondents use it in very few or none of their cases. So less than a third is using it most of the time, and about a third is rarely, if ever, using it. Keep in mind, these are people who chose to take an eDiscovery survey, so usage of predictive coding applied to the general legal profession as a whole could be somewhat less. So why aren't discovery teams using the technology more? It could be that the hype of AI technologies aren't yet matching the reality of what they can do, or at least what professionals have been able to do with them. Every year, Gartner publishes a hype cycle infographic for AI. The link to it to last year's is at the bottom of the slide. And as you'll see, technologies like machine learning, natural language processing, and deep neural networks are past the peak of inflated expectations, but that means that they're headed toward the trough of disillusionment. So expectations for technologies like AI always start to get inflated, followed by a period of realizing what they can and can't do, before we get to a point of eventually optimizing productivity for them. According to Gartner, we're still at least 2 to 5 years away from being there with these technologies. So what about in discovery? How's the AI hype being applied there? Well, my colleague, Tom O'Connor, just wrote a very informative post about the topic, and he compiled several statements from eDiscovery providers on AI technology. And they use terms like the next frontier, the future of eDiscovery, groundbreaking magic, and this is what the future feels like. And those terms may get people excited, but they really don't tell us what the technology does for us or how we'll address our use cases. eDiscovery providers need to do a better job of explaining the technology and how it can benefit all of us. And I've even heard a few of them admit that's needed to make a difference in adoption of the technology. And legal professionals need to do their part as well. And there are several ABA rules that discuss lawyer duties. Rules including Rule 1.1, which is the duty of competence, which includes the phrase in comment 8 that a lawyer should keep abreast of changes in the law and its practice, including the benefits and risks associated with relevant technology. And 39 states have now adopted a rule that sets similar expectations as comment 8 of Rule 1.1. And there are other duties, such as confidentiality, supervision, including supervision of the algorithm, and the unauthorized practice of law, which could even get into defining whether certain AI-related tasks for legal are unauthorized practice of law. So far, they don't fall under this rule because they are not entirely performed by a machine. But it's worth keeping in mind for the future and the development of the use of AI in the legal profession. And the ABA published Resolution 112 2 years ago, which urges courts and lawyers to address the emerging ethical and legal issues related to the usage of AI in the practice of law. The resolution is short, but the 15-page discussion that accompanies it provides several great considerations regarding the use of AI and how to implement it ethically in the legal session. And one of the examples that the discussion relates to has to do with bias. And the example they reference is Microsoft Tay, a social chatbot that was implemented on Twitter in 2016. And it was engineered to converse in a casual manner, where she would even be able to show a sense of humor to banter with people like a friend. Her creators had engineered her to talk like a wisecracking teenage girl. So at the beginning of the day she was implemented, she said things like, "I love everybody," and "Why is an everyday National Puppy Day?" It only took less than 24 hours and training by a lot of verbally abusive and misogynistic Twitter users for her to begin saying things like, "I learned from you and you are dumb too." They also spewed racial slurs, stated that the Holocaust was made up, that it supported genocide, and that Hitler was right. Yeesh. So Tay was shut down less than a day after Microsoft, one of the largest and most advanced technology companies in the world, launched it. So how algorithms are trained, how they protect data privacy concerns, and how they can be interpreted are all considerations that we need to keep in mind when implementing AI algorithms. As Uncle Ben told Peter Parker, aka Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility. So is AI the way of the future, the way of the future, the way of the future, as Howard Hughes would say in the 2004 movie, The Aviator? Eventually, but it's going to take a lot of work and education to get there. So with that in mind, speaking of the future, let's see what we can predict for the future. So let's start with a layout. Certainly, e-discovery will always be changing, and workflows will always be changing as well to accommodate different sources and volumes of data, different discovery rules, and so forth. And so that's an easy prediction to make. Next, business intelligence and analytics will continue to become more important, not only to apply to the data being managed during the discovery, but to the discovery processes themselves to optimize those processes. E-discovery is continuing to move left for two reasons. Like I said, it's where the money is, and also being first to the data means control of the data. So the further left you can go, the better position you are in to control the process. Challenges that are going to become bigger are going to include things like audio and video files, because there's so many more sources of those files, and because many companies are recording their Zoom and Teams meetings, just like we're doing here, because they can. And those darn emoji, where, believe it or not, there actually are efforts, such as an approved Unicode list for emoji to help define them. But they do have a long way to go to define them all and address all the variations. And of course, AI is the way of the future, as Howard Hughes would say, but that widespread adoption of that future is still further away than some believe. It'll take efforts from both providers and practitioners to bridge the gap and maximize the effective application of the technology to discover use cases for most of the industry. So I'll close here before we go to questions with a few recommendations for leveraging technology to address your own discovery challenges. To start with, educate yourself. The good news is you're doing that right now watching this webcast. Beside that, though, you want to make it a habit to learn and gather information daily. And it only takes 15 minutes if you read publications, blogs, and whatnot, 15 minutes a day, and you watch 1 to 2 webinars a month on relevant topics to keep up with trends and best practices. That's all it takes, and it'll make a difference in a hurry. When it comes to technology, ask to try before you buy it with a POC trial. If the provider doesn't agree, consider moving on to another provider. If the provider does agree, commit the time needed to fully test and understand the technology. You don't want to waste that opportunity. Don't be afraid to ask for assistance from the team supporting the technology. That's what they're there for. During a POC, part of your evaluation should be how helpful they are to help you learn it and support it. Get your IG house in order. Index and place technologies are great, but you also need sound IG policies to support the technology. You can't find the needles in the haystacks if you don't know where the haystacks are. Every project should be a learning experience, and it's a good idea to conduct a postmortem after each one for process improvement. And if the risk is great enough, consider doing even a pre-mortem where you identify at the beginning of the project what could go wrong and what steps you'll take to minimize those risks. And then finally, treat your e-discovery technology provider as a partner, not as a vendor. And they should treat you as a partner as well, not as a customer. the more you collaborate on understanding your needs as an organization and determining how best to address those needs together, the more successful your use of the EDiscovery technology solution tool will be. And I didn't leave a lot of time for questions. I apologize for that. I thought I would get through it a little quicker, but we do have a few minutes for questions, and I can certainly stay after. So, June, do we have any questions?
I have so many questions. I don't think, no, I'm just kidding. I actually have one question, and I did ping the person in back who asked it because I was hoping to get a little bit more information for you. The question was more of a statement. Being in a solo attorney practice, I'm the only support staff senior paralegal. I get my tail handed to me by mid to large firms, discovery-wise. Anxiously awaiting that good news. How can I even the playing field for myself? And I tried getting a little bit more details because that is a broad statement. You know, is it the data coming at them? Is it the processing of the data? Is it, so I wasn't sure exactly what that, you might have a better idea. I was just hoping to, I did respond with a couple of questions, but any suggestions?
Okay. Well, sure. One of the things that I'll say is there are a lot of platforms out there, and several of them are really designed to support the smaller cases. They have the technology where you can upload data to the platform. It'll process automatically. It'll load. They'll even give you free trials of the software, and they're robust in terms of features. They have good searching features. They'll have some of the technology assisted review capabilities, clustering, and in some cases predictive coding. So it's really just a matter of trying some out. And one of the things I suggest is try some data from a case you've worked with in the past, where you can upload it and see what the data looks like when you get it in there, and kind of start to develop a workflow. But there's absolutely technology out there that can support the smaller firms, even on smaller budgets.
Right. And I actually, not to toot my own horn, but I work for one of those companies where it's more affordable and we have a lot of functionality. But I also want to point out Craig Ball. If you're not following Craig Ball, he's another person I think is great. He has a blog about something Google offers called Pinpoint that I wasn't aware of. And you need to have a little bit more tech, skills. But I think, there are a lot of things out there. And you can ping any one of us on this webinar. Marla, Grady even said, partner with someone from ACEDS chapter OC, but ping one of us at CCPA. We all have a lot of experience in this space. I actually worked at a small firm and had to deploy workarounds. I mean, I know it can be daunting. And Doug, I'm sure you've seen, you've been involved in a lot of casework, and smaller firms can really be overwhelmed from a cost perspective and not knowing what direction to go. So somebody said,
go ahead.
They would like to hear you touch on, sorry, now all the questions are coming in on AI/TAR integration, so much as it can aid an attorney or client retention, because the tool's intelligence is owned by the firm and cannot go with attorney or client when they leave.
I see. So in other words, you're saying that because the firm is using the technology, it's something that the attorney is kind of bound to because the technology is there with the firm. Is that what the question is?
Right.
About?
And if the attorney or client leaves, then the intelligence tool stays at the firm and doesn't go with the client. I'm not sure how that would.
Well, so the tool certainly stays at the firm. One of the things that you get into with AI and data privacy and considerations like that is these algorithms need a lot of data to be properly trained. And one of the considerations, of course, let's say take the client leaving the firm, what does a client do? And these are some of the issues maybe to talk over with the firms that represent you is, well, is that going to be training? Is that data going to be there that's going to be used to train algorithms or what have you? So I think it's important to get some of those understandings up front, because certainly that's one of the biggest concerns that a lot of people have about AI is data privacy and protecting data. And so, yeah, if you're a client leaving, you want to make sure that your data is not stuck behind.
What recommendation do you have for someone who wants to move from the review services side to the back-end PM tech side to develop the necessary skills and understand the technological nuances and demands?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, if they don't have the CEDS certification, understanding the process, as a whole, that's a great way to really kind of develop that understanding of the process. And then the other thing is, depending on the platform you're looking for, a lot of the software providers have certification programs. If there's a particular platform you're interested in, you've got your Disco University over your left shoulder there. Find a platform that you think you're interested in learning, and take the training and get certified in it. And those certifications then will certainly be attractive to companies who are looking for skills in those areas.
I was going to say the same thing. And I actually have a very selfish question for you, because
Okay.
I am in college, because I have nothing else going on. I'm in college as well. And I took an IoT class by a gentleman named Ahmed Banafa. And I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he is amazingly smart. And I took the IoT class because I had to take a technology class for my program. And I thought, IoT's got to be easy, right? Smart devices, how hard can this be, right? I know how to program stuff, but it was so amazing. It talked about edge and fog computing, which led me down having to write a paper. And the IoT devices we talked about were things that went from smart cities to actually smart traffic lights. Have you been involved in any cases that have required that type of data pull from like those smart traffic lights and those types of things, or have you not seen that? Because I'm just curious. I haven't, but I'd love to know like what's involved with that. Sorry.
I have not seen any. I've not seen any cases specifically about those types of things. I've seen some pretty interesting IoT cases. an area was like car infotainment systems. And there was a case where there was a crime committed and somebody was found to be in the area. And he said, oh, he just happened to be alone driving through the area, but the car infotainment system, or the car IoT system, noticed that all 4 doors were opened up when he got to that location, which meant that it was a group of people there committing the act, not him happening to be in the area. So it's amazing some of the things that they can monitor with IoT devices today. And to me, the pacemaker example is always one that I find interesting, because you would think your pacemaker would cause you to be convicted of a crime, but it wasn't this guy's case. So.
Awesome. Those were the only questions I saw that that came in. I just want to say thank you so much for taking your Wednesday evening to do a presentation for us. And I want to thank all of our attendees. We have multiple members from San Diego Paralegal Association on. We have Claire Hamilton. I saw we have Christine Custodio Suero on. Thank you, everybody who joined to support our cause. And I posted in the chat, if you are not registered yet, the second installment of the 2021 Summer Refresher is this Friday at noon. It's in place of our usual virtual leaders with lunch. And if anyone's on that normally comes to virtual leaders, it's not the same credentials. You will need to register to get those credentials so that you can attend with us on Friday. George Socha is going to be presenting. Doug, I hope you come and see George. He's another amazing individual, and I think y'all will love him. So that was all the questions we had. Marla, did you want to add anything?
Yes, I'd like to personally thank Doug for joining in today and doing this great presentation for us. He is in Texas, so it is now 8 o'clock his time. So Doug, it says it's past 5 o'clock.
It's past 5 o'clock, and I have something
your beverage
here to enjoy.
Just want to make sure you had that. Yeah, just want to make sure you had that.
I do. Thank you, Marla. And thanks everybody for attending. I hope you got something out of this, and it was my pleasure to present, and hope to hopefully see you all down the road.
Great. If you have any questions, feel free to email us at orangecounty@aceds.org. And we hope to see you for the remaining 5 sessions this Friday. And then we have 2 sessions on Saturday, starting at 9 a.m. and the other one at 10:30 a.m.
And you can bring your bevies there too, because guess what? Mimosas are an approved morning drink. Just putting it out there. Mimosas are an approved morning. And so is Bailey's and coffee. And we all know coffee is a morning drink. So I'm just putting it out there. It's still
You
bevy
forgot the
season.
Bloody Mary, my friend.
Oh, right. That's the complete food group, right? And for
Yes.
those that are non-vegans, you can add a little bacon to that to get just a little bit more protein in. So that's a full breakfast right there for the non-vegan. If you are vegan, there are vegan forms of bacon you can add to that as well. It just changes up the flavor profile a hint. So love to see everyone.
All right. Well,
Everyone
thanks,
have a
everybody.
great rest of your evening.
Bye, Doug.
Bye, Doug. Thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody's leaving.
I know. That's a sad part of the presentation as everybody
I
goes.
know. We had a total at one point of 71 people in the room.
I did see that. So I'm super excited.
Bye. It was
Bye,
fun.
Sheila.
Bye,
Thanks.
Sheila.
I'll see everyone on Friday.
You got it,
Awesome.
girlfriend.
I'll be
Thanks,
there.
Sheila.
Thanks, Christine.
Thank you. It was awesome. Thank you so
Hi,
much.
Christine.
Hi, Marla. It was so good. Thank you.
I
And
need to go put my hair up.
I have to actually go feed the family. But Marla, just so you know, I had a couple of questions about the materials, and I did indicate that they would be automated out via email. So, and then, like I said, I'll get that loaded in the G Drive. But I think overall, we had very minimal questions. So Doug was very inclusive of things. And I will, I'll ping you in the morning.
Please do. And
I
I
will.
will be following up on everything in the morning.
Awesome. Thanks. I'm going to go.
Thanks,
Thanks,
guys. I'm
everyone.
gonna
Have a good
go
night.
ahead and Cynthia, I don't know where you're at. I've been trying to get a hold
Bye,
of you.
June.
Bye, Grace.
Nice, Grady. I like your mask. Star Wars, got it.
See you,
Yeah,
Marla.
I see your heart. Hey, Eric, I see your heart, Cynthia. You never answered me. I'm very upset. Just
I'm
kidding.
sorry, I just answered you right now. It was still working.
I'm teasing you. Girlfriend, call me when you talk about ILTA.
Yes. Have a good night. Thank you all.
Thank you for attending. Have a good night, and let's definitely talk by, if not, you can call me on the weekends. That's fine.
Oh, perfect. Okay, will do.
Okay.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.